friends, Jerry Rosa here in the Rosa String Works Workshop. We have a visitor from Pennsylvania. His name is Dan Lipsey.
That's correct.
Am I saying the last name right?
Totally correct.
Well, there you go. Anyway, Dan is staying up at the rental retreat for a day or so. We have a couple of instruments that he brought. Well, actually, both of them are rather, I wouldn't say they're unique, but they're, rare, I guess you'd say, or not real common. If you were to blindfold me and make me put my hands all over it, I'd say it's a Martin, D28 or something like that. And that's basically what it is. It looks just like a Martin. It feels just like a Martin. Everything about it reminds me of a Martin. The bridge, the fingerboard, everything. The story you had was that a Martin executive started this company. Is that right?
That's what I heard. That's what I was told.
Yeah, that's what he was told. And this is a Delta. There you go. I really am not familiar with this. Looks to be a pretty cool guitar. I also understand he's interested in selling these guitars, the two that he brought to me. Is that right?
That's correct.
It's a really nice looking guitar. It's rosewood back and sides, the mahogany neck. It's got a spruce top. It's a real high grade of spruce on the top. So it's a very well made guitar. It's definitely no cheapie. What we're basically going to do is just set it up to play well and clean it up as much as we can. If I'm being critical, the only thing that looks a little weird to me is the fingerboard. If you look at the finger grooves there, it looks like it's possibly rosewood that's been dyed black. That does look a little strange because typically it would be ebony. The pores in the grain are fairly large, a little larger than you would typically see in ebony. So that's what it looks like to me, which would be a little unusual. But other than that, it's just virtually a Martin guitar. So let's get started. Well, you can see I have the strings off of it. I will tell you that off camera, these were difficult to get the pins out. They're wooden pegs, which is no big deal, but they just didn't fit uniformly either. Like this one went all the way down, the rest of them didn't go down, and they were really hard to get out. So I'm going to work on those and the fit on that eventually. But first, I think we're going to start with the obvious stuff. He wants these all cleaned up and looking good, so I think I'm just going to take them over to the buffer while the strings are off of them and just buff them up and clean them up a little bit. Might actually wipe them down with a damp towel first, and I'm not going to film all that, but I'll show you what it looks like once I clean it up. Just so you know, the first thing I've done is I've wiped down the whole guitar with just plain warm water, and that did a nice job. It actually made it look really nice. I may not really need to buff anything, but I think I will, because I do see a little bit of mark here and there, and little very fine surface scratches, so we can buff it out a little bit. I just thought I'd mention to you too, the tuning keys felt a little bit grimy, so I wiped them down again with the water as well, and I noticed they were all loose, so I tightened up all the screws. And I just thought I'd mention this just for what it's worth. Notice that each one of the gears has a little hole in it. What do you think that hole's for? People have argued with me that you shouldn't oil tuning keys. Well, what do you think they put that hole there? And you might say, that's so they can breathe. Well, I'm sorry, but metal gears don't really need to breathe too much. But it is necessary to oil them once in a while. Otherwise, you got metal on metal grinding together. And this does make them turn much easier, and the way they're designed keeps them from slipping. Basically, the gears are perpendicular to one another, so they just really can't slip. Unless this worm gear is being turned, the other gear can't spin this one. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. They do turn freely now, feeling pretty good. So once again, I'm just going to step over to the big buffing wheel and buff this out a little bit, and I'll be right back. Well, I went over to the buffer and attempted to buff it, and it just didn't do anything. I buffed one half of it, and then compared the sides, and you really couldn't tell which one I buffed. So I went ahead and buffed the other side out just to be equal. I quit on that. I didn't even bother going to the sides and stuff. Some finishes buff really good, some just don't buff worth a darn. So this one just didn't buff out, so there's no point in continuing and spending time and money. I did notice the darkness here. You know, considering he's interested in selling these, I think it's wise to show what we have here. It is a little dark in this area. There is a little bit of a dark staining around these edges, and I believe that's a chemical reaction to the case. I don't think that that's coming off. You could potentially scrape it off, but the problem with scraping it is you could go much lighter than this other area really quick, and that's why I didn't bother scraping it. To me, I've seen this a lot on instruments over the years, and my opinion is you're better off just leaving it alone. Someone else may have a method for getting that discoloration out of there, but honestly, I don't think you can do it without making just as big a mess the other way. I think otherwise the guitar is really very nice, so I'm just going to go ahead and get to the fretboard and get the business end of this thing working. The guitar does have an adjustable truss rod, and it's adjusting in here. It's adjustable through here. I've looked down it. It looks plenty flat to me. I don't see any particular bows or bends or anything, so I'm just going to go ahead and do the good quick leveling. I don't feel any real high spots. Typically I can feel them instantly, and I don't feel any high spots. These are either really hard frets or some kind of really slick material. The file is gliding over them almost like glass. It's kind of unusual feeling. So I kind of think these might be a little bit harder brass than normal or something. They definitely have a different feel on filing them. Dare I say, it feels as slick as snot on a doorknob. What I do then is I get it in the light and I look at it, and I can see this one's not been filed there and this one's not been filed there. You know, if you get it in the right angle, you can see where they've been filed. There's a low spot here, a low spot right there. Kind of a teeny tiny low spot right here, but not enough to worry about. But anyway, we'll work on a little bit more. The idea when you're filing is to keep the file moving. Don't stay in one place. In this area where it's still a little low, I'm just flaring it out, and it'll flare out just fine. That looks pretty good. There's the tiniest little spot right there now, but I usually stop at that point because that will come out when I crown it. You don't want to take off any more than you have to. You got to know when to stop, and right now I believe is the place. So now I'm just going to at a 45 go across the ends of the frets, and I've kind of rounded as kind of twisted a little bit to just kind of round over the ends. Got to be real careful up here that I keep my finger under here to keep the file off the top of the guitar. That feels pretty good. So I think they're all very level. It should play really well with that. I have the crowning file here, and I've learned that the best way to crown frets for a guitar, at least, is to go to the largest crowning file. Even though this is intended for large, really large frets, what I did was I filed the edges of this off. I took it to my belt sander and actually rounded off the corners of this. On camera, for some reason, it's not cooperating and going in the slot here. I don't know why. Anyway, so you can possibly see that I've rounded off the corners or the edges of this file. Now this is the largest one, and these frets are not that large, but this crowns them much faster than using the size that's intended. And to me, speed and accuracy and ease of use is what it's all about, and that's why I do it this way. But you do have to file off the edges, otherwise you make marks in the fretboard. It's actually fairly quick when you get the right tool. The other thing you want to know about this is you don't want to file the fret any more than you have to. You want to leave the peak there more or less unfiled, if you will, and the main reason is because you don't want to change the height of any one fret. You just want to round off the corners and kind of bring them together, but leave the very middle unfiled, if you know what I'm saying. Otherwise, you're changing the height of your fret, and we don't want to change the height of the fret after working so hard to get them level. Once again, when you get up to this area, you got to slow down a little bit so you don't accidentally bump the top of the guitar. Some of the new viewers to the channel will notice I don't bother taping off the fretboard. It would be a waste of my time to do that. If you need to tape off the fretboard to keep from making big scratches and problems, then you should do that. Okay, that looks pretty good. So what I do next is just take a large brush, which ordinarily is in that drawer right there, but because I'm on camera, it's hiding. It's hiding in a lower drawer. And I clean that off. And then I usually take either 400 or 600 wet or dry. Often it just depends on what I grab first. The 600 is good, and it depends on whether you think the 600 will get the job done, and I think in this case it will. These are pretty smooth. So I'm going to go with the 600, and I go like this and do it. I know that most people do this, but if you just do this, after you've done this a few times this way, you'll understand why I do this. It's so much faster. It rounds them off. They look like it came from the factory that way. And it only takes a second or two compared to all of the time it takes to do it the other way. Some people complain that this leaves marks in the frets this way. If you can get a magnifying glass or a microscope and see a mark, I'll pay you money. You can't see a mark in this. There's no mark in this anywhere. 600 grit, after all, is pretty darn fine sandpaper, and especially on something like brass. It really is very nice. If the camera can focus, I'm sure you can see how nice it is and how slick it is and how there are no marks in it whatsoever. The true test is you take your fingernail and you go like that. If there's any kind of mark, you'll feel it with your fingernail, and you will not feel anything in those. So there you go. That's my story. I'm sticking to it. The only negative of doing that is that it messes up the actual fingerboard. As you can see, it's discolored it. But I don't care about that because there's all these finger grooves and we have to go in and flatten that all out anyway. So you just do it in the right order and it doesn't create a problem. You can see quickly there, I've got most of that one out. It's still showing up a little bit. I'm going to try to get it almost all the way out. I don't know if I can get it all or not. These are pretty deep. These are actually fingernail grooves, by the way. The reason you can tell that is because they're always just on the other side of the string where your fingernail would hit. You see them much more often in rosewood, which is what this is. And these are so deep, in fact, that I don't think we're going to get them all out. You could fill this with CA glue, and that's not a terrible option. In my opinion, these grooves don't really hurt anything other than the appearance, and the CA glue will even be worse on the appearance, in my opinion. That really depends on who you're talking to and what they like to see. As far as I'm concerned, I would just leave them this way. And you can see how I'm doing this. It does take quite a bit of finger strength to do this and do it well without scratching the fingerboard. It looks a lot easier than it is. You really have to hold the razor blade really tight. Put a good amount of pressure on it as you're doing this to keep it from chattering, because it will chatter and make all kinds of little ugly marks on your fingerboard if you let it chatter. But if you do it right, it only takes a couple of minutes to do it. At some point, you may have to change blades because the blade will start leaving little scratch marks. You know, it just gets weak or something in some area. So I'm changing blades now. Oddly enough, the hardest one to do is the very end one because there's no fret to bump up against on the one side. So you kind of just have to pull it to the fret. Once you do it once, you'll kind of understand why you have to do that. You can push it a little bit like this, but that doesn't always work all that well. I think we might be able to get the rest of those out. It's going to be close. Let's see if they'll come out. One of them just basically came out. The other one's just barely still there. And I'm getting most of this one out too. So that's pretty much gone. This fret here is not going to go away. It's deep. And this one's pretty deep too. I think that's as good as we can do, but you can see that the fret fingernail marks are much more minimal than they were. What I do after I do that now is I go back along every single fret and I rake it with the very corner of the razor blade, and you notice I keep my thumb here so that I pull it into that and I don't slip and hit the top of the guitar. Once you get past the top of the guitar, you can go just a little faster and don't have to worry about hitting anything. And if you're wondering why I'm doing this, it's to get rid of the little creeping crud and the little fuzzies that build up right along the frets as you scrape it the other way. I do both sides of every fret. I may be making this look a little more easy than it is too. You can create a lot of problems doing this if you don't maintain control over this. It'll make a lot of scratches and it can make a mess. It's really not too hard to do if you just take your time with it. That fingerboard there is as close to factory fresh as you'll get. It's just really nice. What I'm going to do now, I'm going to put on the Be Good oil, and it's kind of an oil and a wax. I'll just drip a few drops across here. And this stuff is food safe, so it's just as nice to rub it in with your fingers sometimes, just as easy. And then I take one of the old towels and wipe it up and just basically throw the towel away when I'm finished, because that towel's already been used for a million things already. I recycle my towels as much as possible because there's no point in just using a brand new towel on every single step. That looks super nice now. I think you'd have to agree that with the exception of the small amount of fingernail grooves that we can't get out, that looks basically brand new. I could have gone ahead and just polished these out to a mirror, but quite honestly, that's just a slight appearance thing, and it really doesn't provide any particular function, and it just takes more time, and I don't see any real need to do that. They are absolutely slick. So I'm just going to go ahead and let this one go because they shined up really nice from the 600. Just saves the customer some money, so no point in spending any extra money we don't have to spend. I'm going to try to clean these posts up. They're kind of, I don't know, tarnished or something a little bit. See if anything comes off. Actually, it looks like it might. I've got a brass brush here. Sometimes you can take a brass brush and brighten something up. I'm going to see if the brass brush will clean off the top of these. Yeah, there's a significant difference between the top of this one and the tops of the other ones. I think you can possibly see the difference there. Maybe not, I don't know, but that's the one I cleaned. You can definitely see it right here. So I'm going to go ahead and clean just the tops of these off. It's making quite a difference, actually. Looks much better. This is just a damp cloth. I'm going to wipe down the peg head here just to get any stuff that's on the peg head off. Looks pretty good. All right, so I'm going to pause for a minute here and look at the saddle and the bridge area and see what I can do to maybe improve the pin fit and that kind of thing. I'll show you what I end up with. What I do, especially if I'm having trouble fitting pins into a bridge or something, is I always keep them in the same order, because often a pin will fit in a certain hole better than other holes. Plus, the grooves have often been enlarged for the bigger strings, so I always try to keep them in the same place. These being wooden pegs, they're very blunt on the end, and the string button can catch on that, then slip off later and cause you a problem. So I like to bevel those ends off, and it's really fairly easy to do. In the case of these hard wooden ones, I'm using this double cut file. I'll just file them off like this, round them off. Then that way the button will slide off of there and won't get caught on there. I'm going to do that to each one of these pins. I keep the groove pointed up as I file it off. I'm just using my little vise here as a way to kind of hold the pin. I just set it in the groove there between the jaws. And that works pretty well. Okay, we'll show you the next step here in just a minute. Okay, something I already did off camera was I ran my little reamer through every hole. I hold my finger underneath each hole, and as soon as the end touches, I just stop. So in other words, as soon as I can feel it spinning on the end of my finger, I stop right there. That makes all the holes really close to the same size. I'm going to see if they go in there now. This one did go all the way down before. The rest of them did not. Now those are going down. See, this hole was the biggest hole, and that reamer then made them all the same size. Now they're all going down. This one's a little bit tight right here. So I'm just going to run the reamer in one more time. I didn't really cut very much at all. It doesn't take much, by the way. Just the least little bit makes a big difference on something like that. And that one's just a little tight too. That's quite a bit better. This one here's a little tighter. I don't want them real tight. I just want them where they go down and they feel pretty good. They all feel about the same now. All right, so let's move on to putting the strings on. Here's the strings that Dan chose to put on the guitar. I just happened to have two sizes in stock today. I had either these or the standard medium, so we went with these, which is called the Custom Light. They're 11 to 52. A little bit lighter than standard light, but not that much. I think that's a good choice, really. When I put these pins in, I always pull up on the string so that the string button slides past the end of the pin and is pulled up tight to the top. And then here, I'm going to show you my quick method for putting them on the post. You just lay it right up here, you pull it up tight, you go through the inside of the post, you pull it around here one time, you cross over the top of the string, and then you come back, you go over the top of the strings that are already wound, through the hole, over the top of everything. You pull it up tight. Honestly, these posts are a little short. The holes are very close to the peg head, so it's a little more complicated on this one for some reason. It's probably mostly this big string too. I don't think it'll be quite as tough on the rest of the strings. And then that way you pull that up tight, and essentially as soon as you start turning, you're tightening the string then. You don't have all that loose stuff to wind up. You can see that it does a real nice job, real quick. It's about the fastest way you can put strings on, and it's also winding it down the post. I'm not going to show any more of that. I'll get the strings on here and I'll show you what we ended up with. I thought I'd point out that on this side of the peg head, I do all the strings the way I showed you on this one. But on this side of the peg head, I do it in more the traditional method. From the inside of the peg, poke it through the hole to the outside, go back around the far end of the peg, come under the string and lift up. Again, that winds the string down the peg. I don't leave a lot of slack. You can see how much slack I have there, but this does require a little more winding. Sometimes, and especially now that my hands hurt so much, I will go to the string winder. I typically didn't use this for years, but I'm using it more now. Makes it a little easier on the hands. Well, my friends, the action is very good on this guitar. It's 80 on the bass side and about 60 on the treble. I've just checked it to see if it buzzed anywhere. It does not buzz. It's got a real nice sound. I don't think it could be set up much better than it is. There's always little things I guess you could tweak. You'd kind of be wasting some time, I think, on this one because it's pretty darn good. I'm going to check the intonation right now and let you see how that looks because I have not checked that. Okay, maybe you can see the tuner as I'm seeing it. Boy, right on the money. Wow, right on the money. You can't do much better than perfect, so I generally stop when they're perfect. Sometimes I keep going, but most of the time I stop. You can see it doesn't buzz anywhere and it's very easy to play. Very nice guitar. You couldn't go wrong getting a guitar like that, I don't think. We'll put Dan's email in the description and perhaps on the screen, and if you want to get a hold of him, just email him. Of course, he's going to be getting emails for the rest of his life now. So you can probably assume that if you're seeing this a year later, it's probably gone. Well, Dan's second instrument that we're going to work on today is a 12-string Martin guitar. It's a nice guitar. It's a little, I don't know, it's been in the case for quite a while. It's got a little bit of a issue. I don't know what's on it. We almost want to call it mildew, but I don't think it's mildew. I think it's just some kind of a reaction between the case and the guitar, perhaps, because really it doesn't seem to be even wiping off. It's just kind of a, I don't know. But we're going to buff it, and I think we can get rid of all that, whatever that is. The biggest issue with this particular guitar seems to be the neck, and the neck isn't terrible for a 12-string, especially of this age. What is this, in the 60s?
Oh, yeah, mid-60s.
Mid-60s. The neck's not terrible, but it does, I'm exaggerating. The neck does lift a little bit this way. Right now, without it being strung up, we're at about between 10 and 15 thousandths underbow in this area, which isn't horrible. It'd be nice if it was flat, but because it will pull some underbow in it, obviously, when we string it up. But I think the first thing we're going to do on this one is just go over to the buffing wheel and buff it out. And you can see a before here, and I'll show you an after in just a minute. I kind of think this always had a satin finish on it, but the satin finish is kind of hit and miss at this point. So I think we're just going to try to buff it out and see what it looks like. Well, my friends, I think you can see a significant difference in the way this looks. It just looks, a million times better. It needs a little bit of TLC. There's little places where I couldn't get the big buffer into. So I may clean up some of the real obvious places like that. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it, but I'll spend a little bit where it really needs it. Because he's going to be selling these, I think it's worth it to show you the various things. It's got a few little minor scars in the back, but not too bad, for one of the 60s. It's got a little bit of a crack right here. Doesn't seem to be too big of a deal, and it doesn't bother me much. I'm going to see if I can't get a little CA glue to bleed in there, but it really isn't an open crack or a loose crack or anything like that, so I don't think it's a big deal. The top here where the pickguard had shrunk. The pickguard really shrank up on this one. It's not even usable. I just threw it away. It curled up so badly that it wasn't even worth trying to salvage, I don't think. Though I might dig it out and see if I can heat it up and soften it, but I don't think it will. It's pretty bad. Because of that curling, it did cause a tiny little hairline right in here, but not a big deal. I just think it's worth it to show you all these things in case you're interested in buying it. They got a little bit of a bruise right here, you know, just a little scratch type thing, but not a big deal. Overall, it's in very, very good shape, especially considering the age and everything. It's in, I would say, very, very good shape. I guess I'll move on to seeing what I can do about the pickguard and maybe cleaning up these last little places, and I'll do most of that off camera. If I come up with any revelation on the pickguard, I'll show you what I come up with. Just showing you what I'm doing here. This was really, really a lot more curled than it is now. I should have shown you the before. This was curled all the way up to about right here. Really a lot. I've flattened it out just with heat. I thought maybe worst case scenario I could use this as a pattern. At the very, very edge, it's just not cooperating that much. It's working, but not great. May have to just press it between two boards or something, put it in a vise or something like that. It's kind of like almost, but not quite. It's definitely way better than it was. But I think it's at least good enough for a pattern, if nothing else. It's a little difficult to make something fit this if you don't have a pattern. You can do it, but it's not that easy. It's much easier if you have a pattern. Oh well, I'll show you if I come up with any other ideas here. Just so you know, this particular gear and screw was missing. Fortunately, the pin here, or whatever you want to call that, the post, was still there. So all we had to do was find a new gear and a new screw. And thanks to all my wonderful viewers who sent me all those spare parts, we were able to find an almost exact match. And it turns just perfectly, no problem at all. You would not be able to tell it, I don't think, if you didn't know it. Then what I did was I went through and I turned every single one of these just to the point where they hit snug. I did not go past snug. I mean, I just went up to where it kind of like stopped, and then I just stopped right there. That's kind of the way you keep these kinds of screws tight. You don't want to over tighten them, because if you do, you can't turn them for anything. Now I'm just going to put a little bit of oil on every one of these joints right here. This will get the, help lubricate the metal on metal. It's good to turn these at that point. Once you put the oil on there, to spread it around a little bit. And just a little tiny drop of oil is all you need. Some of these, I can feel them get a little tight and loose in places on these gears. Not too bad on most of them. Most of them turn pretty good. So we'll move on to the next step here. I have, I straightened up the old pickguard as best I could. I put it in a vise and squeezed it really tight to get it as flat and as large as I could get it, so that I could use it as a pattern for this. So I put it on top of this, traced around it, and then I just sanded this one basically on the disc sander over there until I got it pretty close. So it's just about the way I want it. I think I'm going to just take and sand the edge by hand a little bit to soften the edge, because now it's pretty square and flat. It fits it pretty well. The thing I don't like, and I don't know if I should do anything about it, and I probably shouldn't, is I don't like this lip right around here. There's kind of it sticks up. I wish it was flat, and so I'm just going to see if I can knock it down a little bit. I'm trying to keep just the tip of the razor blade right there on that, so I don't get out into the finish. It seems a little bit better. It's not quite as sharp sticking up. That might be a little better. I kind of think that's worth doing. Okay, so I think that's about as good as it gets. I'm going to clean off this pick guard. It gets a little staticky build up there, and so I'm going to see if I can peel off the sticky backing. This came with a backing on it already. This is a commercial type pick guard. Now the trick of this, of course, is trying to fit the old spot. So I'm just going to do the best I can. I don't guarantee that it's going to fit it perfectly. That old pick guard that I used for a pattern had shrunk a little bit. So I'm trying to get inside of the shrink all the way around here so it doesn't look too bad on one side or the other. It's not perfect. I wouldn't tell you it's perfect, but it's pretty good. Yeah, it's actually sticking really well. Kind of amazed how well it did stick down. Now there's a very fine film of plastic over the top of this, and I'm going to leave that film on there. I think he wants to sell this one as well, so might as well leave that film on there so it'll be a brand new pick guard for whoever buys it. Next thing I'm going to do now is turn my attention to this. As I told you, there's a little bit of an underbow in here, so I'm going to focus most of my sanding up in this area and back in this area to try to level that out. You know, it's not going to get perfect. The action on it's probably going to stay a little bit high, but we'll use the lightest 12-string set we have and set it up that way and see how well it works. And we'll show you the results of that when we get there. As I told you, I'm going to focus on the two ends on filing, and that's mainly because this is a non-adjustable truss rod. There's no way to adjust it, so you know, you can only do what you can do. And right now, the only thing I can do to improve this underbow is to file both ends. Now, after you've got both ends knocked down a lot, then you start to glide across and feather it into this rest of this. And I know you can't see it on camera, but when I'm at this end and that end, I'm putting more down pressure, and when I'm in the middle, I'm very light pressure. Okay, that's probably about all I can do. Let's clean it up and let's put the straight edge on it. I thought it looked like it had much more underbow than when we measured it. When we measured it, it wasn't that bad. Now, hopefully, it may not have any, with any luck here. So let me put on my cheaters and we'll see how much underbow there is now. Barely 10 thousandths, if that. You know, so it's improved it definitely. It's because it would go up to the 15 thousandths mark in a place or two, and now it just barely goes under there. The 10 thousandths you can see is really close to the end of this, and it's going maybe to 11 thousandths, if that. So it's really improved a lot. It's unfortunate that it still has some. I wish we could get it all out, and maybe we can improve it a little bit more. The real problem, though, isn't so much down here as it is up here, because the end of the neck is up. So most of the filing needs to be up there. I think that's about all we can really realistically do for this thing. So I'm going to go ahead and crown those and clean up the rest of the fingerboard. I'm not going to show that since I showed that on the other guitar. Well, my friends, we were working on this 12-string and everything was going real well. We got, you know, 90% of the underbow out of there that we needed to get out. It's pretty flat. It's not bad. In fact, on the treble side, it's real flat. On the bass side, just a little bit underbow still. But the real problem came in when we were trying to string it up and set the action. And I've pretty much just determined that this really does need a neck reset. I could probably fix it back here a little bit and kind of make it work for a while. But honestly, with a 12 string, it's going to pull a hump in here. If I have to cut this all down, it's just going to weaken it. And I just can't bring myself to do that. And Dan is a man of integrity, and he would like to have it fixed properly before he sells it. So, or if he decides to keep it, either way. So that's what's going to happen. We're not going to finish this one on camera. I just wanted to let you know that. And we're going to go ahead and put this one in queue and fix it, normal place in queue, I guess you'd say. And so it means it's going to be a few months probably before he gets this one back. But I just thought since Dan was here and, all the way from Pennsylvania, I would just like to ask him a question or two on video if he doesn't mind. So what would you tell him about your experience here at Rosa String Works?
My experience is pretty much everything I expected. I've seen Jerry's videos for quite a while, so I knew the type of work to expect. I knew that he wasn't going to take shortcuts, and I'm happy with the decision we've come to in terms of fixing this guitar. I really love what he did with the other one.
Good. Yeah, that other one's a nice guitar. I like it a lot. It's really nice.
We're having a wonderful time staying at his guest house.
Good.
And it's very nice accommodations. And
great.
Anybody who wants to come this way, that's it.
And we had great barbecue for lunch too. And he paid. Thank you, by the way, for that. Yeah. I really appreciate that. So, yeah, Dan's a great guy. He's into all kinds of the same videos I'm into. I've been watching some boat building. I've been watching airplane building, and he's been watching the same guys doing the same things. It's kind of amazing how many of the videos that we watch are the same. He and I are quite a lot alike, actually. And I find that with most of the people that actually come here, we have so much in common. It's kind of neat. Anyway, Dan, I wished I could have fixed it for you while you waited, but I think this is one of those deals where it just needs to take the time it needs to take. And we just have to do it the right way,
I'd rather have it done the right way.
And, it's a nice guitar, so we don't want to hurry up and screw up or anything. And I kind of think that's what this fix would be if we did it. In the meantime, check out that other guitar. If you're in the market for a nice guitar, I personally would stand behind it. It's a nice guitar. It's not a Martin, but it's just like a Martin. You can't hardly tell the difference. And I think you would enjoy it if you got that one. And his email will be in the description, if not on the screen. So thank you all so much for watching. I appreciate it very much. If you're not yet a subscriber, please click the subscribe button. And if you can, give us a thumbs up. Thank you so much.